Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is Josh Anderson with the Retirement Innovation Lab, and I am joined here today by Katrina Berishaj with Stradley Ronon. We thought it made sense as a follow-up to the prior webinar we did to dive a little bit deeper into the fiduciary concerns that plan sponsors and advisors face when they're navigating the really personalization in workplace retirement. It's not just managed accounts anymore. It's personalized target dates too, that are starting to become a bigger part of the marketplace. So we want to touch on both of those. And so I guess let's just start off. So personalization has certainly been a hot topic lately. I think every conference I went to in the past year has had that, or retirement income as some major theme as part of it. And given all that effort and all that really money spent on distribution, we haven't seen tremendous uptake, right? You see marginal amounts year over year, but certainly not where the industry would expect. Of course, relative to target dates. So I think, it makes sense to address some of these fiduciary concerns, right? They seem to be the big hindrance there. So I guess let's just open it up. Like what are some of the big concerns, and what should fiduciaries be thinking about as they begin this process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think increasingly we've seen participants turn to their companies and seeking financial advice, right? Whether it's within a retirement account or for outside assets. So it's no surprise that we're seeing more personalized solutions hit the market, quite frankly. To your point, the uptake hasn't been great. I think with any new product, there are always going to be concerns. Target dates have been around, seems like forever now. So they are very ubiquitous. Fiduciaries are aware of them. They're not really concerned. And certainly they can be quite cheap these days. So there's that, right, with off-the-shelf target dates. I think when we talk about personalized or customized target dates, you get into fiduciary concerns about the actual management of the target dates, right? It's more customized. It's not off the shelf. They can be helpful, but it's kind of fear of the unknown. And the same thing for managed accounts, right? There's a little bit of fear of the unknown for fiduciary committees, plan sponsors, and honestly, financial advisors. I think there is, managed accounts in particular. You're the product guy, so you know better than I do. But there's a big range, right? Of basically managed accounts and what they take into consideration and how they operate and the user interface and all of these things that make a product a product. And they vary, right? It varies across the board, and I think with a little bit of education, plan sponsors will eventually get there because I think there are some really good products out there that would be helpful for plan participants. But it's just a matter of gaining a little bit of comfort with what the products are, and knowledge and education that I don't think is necessarily there yet. So that's, I think the first thing is it's a new product. There's always going to be some hesitation, particularly when you compare it to things that have been around basically forever now. So that's one thing. I also think that particularly when we talk about customization and being able to look at performance, that can be a little challenging, right? How do you create a track record? How do you look at that? And then benchmarking, even more so. How do you benchmark against other products that are out there, right? When a fiduciary goes through their fiduciary considerations, those are two really important things: performance and benchmarking against similar products.
Which is a challenge with managed accounts,
exactly.
Right?
That's it. I mean, that's probably the biggest challenge. When we think about cost, I think there are forces out there that may be bringing the cost down with respect to managed accounts. And so if you can bring the cost down, get that on par with target date funds, maybe an active target date or a hybrid target date, then I think it makes the argument that a fiduciary should actually be considering a managed account. And then obviously to your point, how do we compare against benchmarks? And I think, I'm not sure that the industry has figured that out yet. But I think that's probably the biggest concern. For me personally, I think user interface is huge. If you don't have a really interactive, helpful, easily digestible tool that folks want to use, yeah, that's the end of the story for me, right?
Yeah.
You've got participants here that, rank and file may not be good with technology. So the harder it is for them to go through and input their information, the less, the less helpful the tool is going to be.
You see more drop off too, I think, right?
For
With
sure.
people enrolling.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I think those are really the big factors.
One thing you said that I kind of was smiling when you said it was with target dates being around forever, but you go back to the launch of them, right? And then mid-90s, I think it was Wells Fargo and then Fidelity shortly afterwards. There wasn't much uptake early on, right? Like early 2000s, you didn't see much uptake, and it was like Pension Protection Act that really kind of drove that. So it'll be interesting to see, does something similar come along that drives the adoption of managed accounts or personalized solutions a little bit more?
Yeah, again, I think that gets to, there's hesitation with any new product, right?
Yeah.
There's just, a lack of knowledge, and it takes a little time to get, educated and get folks out there talking about it, and educating folks. And I think that's honestly, that's a big part of it.
Yeah. So I know you put out, or your team put out, a paper on managed accounts or personalization in retirement plans and some of the fiduciary considerations. And I believe you use the 2012 DOL guidance as somewhat of a framework, which was referenced in the paper, with that paper as well. Can you talk a little bit about what the DOL has put out? And granted, that was directly towards target dates, but I think there's applicability here.
Yeah, there absolutely is. I think it was February 2013 that
13. Okay.
Yeah, that the DOL put that out, if I'm not mistaken. And it is a kind of tips for fiduciaries in selecting target dates. But to your point, the concepts can be used more broadly, right? To any investment option that a plan makes available on their menu, but also for managed accounts. And basically what the Department of Labor said is, hey, these are the factors that you should be considering. Here are the steps that you should be taking, fiduciaries, when you make the determination as to which target date you should be selecting or thinking about in adding it to your plan. And what the Department of Labor said is, think about the plan and think about the participants and the needs and the desires. And the options that are available. Think about cost. And if there is the ability to have a customized target date fund, maybe think about that as well. So it's an acknowledgement, 10 years now by the Department of Labor that there are options that are out there that are available to plans that are customizable, that can be very valuable to plans and ultimately to participants. And so that those tips, again, they're geared toward target dates, but the concepts can absolutely be more broadly applied to really any fiduciary sort of decision making. And the Department of Labor, of course, hit on cost. And what does cost actually mean in the context of ERISA? And really, we think about value, right? You think about the totality of the services that are available with respect to, a given product or a given service. And what is the value of that? A managed account tends to offer a lot more customization, the ability to take in more information, obviously, than a target date, which is, based on age, and retirement date. And managed accounts just have the ability to take in so much more information. Again, better than I do the market. So, you can take into account outside assets, risk tolerance, tax issues, all of these things that a target date just doesn't take into account, no matter how customized,
Right,
really,
right,
the target
exactly.
date
I always say a managed account can do what a target date wants to do, just much better. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's always
So
been the cost that's been the hang up, I think.
exactly. That has absolutely been the case. But again, the market better than I do. I think there's a way to bring costs down now with enhancements in technology and that sort of thing. I think managed account platforms can be cost effective, and offer a suite of services that, if a participant takes them up, can offer really, really great advice, including for with respect to assets outside of the plan. And again, a target date fund just can't do that. So when we think about cost, the Department of Labor and courts have unanimously said across the board, you don't have to select the cheapest option. In fact, just selecting an option because it's the cheapest can be a breach of fiduciary duty, right?
It's funny. We saw a bunch of suits. Hey, you don't have enough index funds, and then it was almost like a few others came out that were, hey, you only focused on costs. So it really underscores, what the DOL has said all along is it's a balance of cost and value rather than just purely cost. So
absolutely, yeah. It's just part of it's one of many factors of a prudent process that a fiduciary really needs to have in place and document really well.
Right. Now, that's a good point. So what should fiduciaries be doing to document this and their decisions along the way?
Yeah, so again, it's important to highlight that fiduciary prudence in the ERISA context doesn't mean that you have to be right all the time. It really means just having a prudent process, following that process, and documenting the decisions and the actions that you took along the way. Documentation is key when it comes to defending yourself against any claims. So we like to say kind of the more you document, the better. But you have to be cognizant and cautious about what it is that you're documenting. You want to document the diligence, right? The options that you considered, the performance, the benchmarking, all of that. That is good to have in the files. You also want to document the conversations that were had, the fact that the fiduciaries, like a fiduciary committee, deliberated among the investment options that were products that they were considering. And ultimately document how you made the decision and the basis on which any big decision really is made.
Yeah. Are there any good cases that folks can look at that would be a roadmap or a what not to do? Perhaps?
Definitely a what not to do. We saw a slew of cases against universities.
Yes.
And one of those cases, I think it may have been the Northwestern case. The fiduciary and a lot of preparation goes into these cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you take the stand and you're deposed, or you take the stand and you speak in front of the judge or a jury, a lot of preparation goes into that. One of these fiduciary members of the committee basically did not know the fundamentals, did not know what it meant to be a fiduciary, did not know that she was a fiduciary. And that is, that it was just, when you get secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, that's something I reference in the paper too, is understand your fiduciary role. What is the vendor providing? what is left from that. And then by default, if there's any risk left, it falls on the fiduciary, it falls on that plan sponsor.
It is so important to know your role. It is so important, and it can be lost, right? That concept can be lost along the way because there are so many people, there are so many hands, there's so many basically folks at the table, and you can lose sight of who's doing what here, what function is someone providing. So that is, I mean, it is critical to know your role, understand what that requires of you. And when you're, yeah.
Especially with the example you just gave, right? She didn't even know she was a fiduciary.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the fundamentals. So that is very important. And particularly when we talk about small companies, it's easy to get lost in that because the same committee or the same decision maker can be both functioning as the plan sponsor, non-fiduciary, right? Amending the plan, let's say, as well as being the fiduciary and selecting the investments and, monitoring the service providers. And it's kind of hard to know when you're in which role.
Right.
But ERISA and courts and the DOL recognizes that the same person can wear two hats. So a non-fiduciary as well as a fiduciary hat, and it's just very critical to know when you're wearing which hat and what decision you're making and what role you're in.
Yeah, agreed. Just going back to the cost conversation, right? I think that's been a big hindrance in getting broader adoption, cost, fiduciary concerns, but cost being a natural one. I know when I was a fiduciary, I always said like the cost is too high, right? Like as a fiduciary, it was hard to justify, 40 bips for the managed account plus, call it 20 to 30 for the funds plus technology, right? Like there's a lot of things that get added in. And I think historically products put participants north of 100 bips, easily north of 80 bips generally. And I think in the last few years, we've seen a lot of new entrants, a lot of price compression due to competition. So now you can see stuff 10 bips, even single digits I've seen. And so I think that really changes things. In your opinion, like what is the bogey for the cost that is prudent versus the value received? Like,
so that's hard to say, right? Because I think, as you kind of just said, price changes, right? Like cost changes. I think I saw in the last maybe week or so, one fund complex dropped the fees on, I want to say hundreds of their funds. So, fees change, and it really is about the prudent process, right? Knowing the options and asking the question about what options are available to me, to the plan, and then taking a look at those options. That really is fundamental and key to a fiduciary that's in the position of making the determination. And so it's hard to say, right? Yeah. It's hard to say, but to your point, it's very compelling. It is very compelling when you have a product and a suite of services that offer a ton of value, and that the cost of those is in line with what is otherwise available that offers, less bells and whistles, right? Less customization. So it really is about, the prudent decision-making process, right? Understanding the options that are available to you. Listen, for some small plans, for a lot of small plans, for most small plans, a customized TDF is just not an option. It's not available, right?
Too small, yeah.
Exactly. But when we look at managed accounts, I think they're coming more online. And I think
every record keeper has a solution at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Which can be available to small plans, big plans. So it's really knowing what options are available to any given plan.
Right.
And then, doing the diligence on them and really uncovering the value, right? Any fiduciary who is considering a managed account is going to want to go through a demo.
Yep.
Um,
See the UI, right? I
Exactly.
mean, that's so important. I think, when I was writing the paper, it was about a 0.1% difference in performance between managed accounts and a target date. And so, my take on that, and that was really eye-opening for me, was like, managed accounts don't necessarily provide the benefit unless there's engagement. And if you don't have a good UI, you're just not going to get the right engagement.
That's right.
And there's a lot of, I think, research that supports that. So I think that's a good transition to our final topic, which is customization and just the prevalence of AMAs. And really, I think the thing I'd like to get across here is what risk do firms bring onto themselves, or advisors bring onto themselves, when they customize beyond off the shelf? Because if you think about it, right, you have your capital markets assumptions, you have your strategic asset allocations, you have, the advice engine, and all of those things are designed to work together. Now, an advisor comes in and says, I want to use my own assumptions. I want to use my own expectations. I want to use my own models. And that can, significantly change things. So curious your thoughts on that.
It can, yeah. So that's one of the things that we always worry about is if you have similarly situated clients, whether they're ERISA participants or not, right? Just similarly situated clients, and their allocations are radically different. How do you explain that to any regulator?
Right.
How do you explain that to any court, right?
Yeah.
You've got, on paper, two very similar people, and you look at their allocations and they don't look anything alike. That's definitely going to add on risk, right, to any business. And it can be systemic, right? If you have a financial advisor or a group of swath of financial advisors who are doing their own thing. I think, that's what we worry about, right? And so to manage that systemic risk, policies, procedures, to review those allocations to make sure that they're in line with what the firm is otherwise doing, I think would be helpful. But when we think about, hey, there's somebody out there that's kind of doing their own thing, and it may be right? We don't know, but there needs to be some oversight to assess that risk. And to, at least from a systemic perspective, kind of manage it. But again, I think that's something that we definitely are concerned with, with respect to plan participants, or really any consumer,
Right.
is being able to explain to any regulator or a court why there was a difference. Why there was a difference.
I think, I've seen that firsthand in the real world, where, we would have a certain, say, allocation to emerging markets, and a firm said, well, we don't, necessarily agree with that, and they would want to change it. And I think that, the instance I'm thinking of, the question back to them was, well, how do you justify excluding such a large part of the global economy and global growth? How do you justify that contrary opinion to, the consensus? And not to say that you can't do that, or they were wrong, but it's that documentation, to your point, of why you made a decision at each point along the way.
That's critical.
I think also, if you take, in certain instances, using the firm models rather than the models provided by the provider, it can significantly change the advice that's actually given on the back end. Now, some of them will adjust for, higher CMEs, lower CMEs, or even actual returns, but not all of them do. And so I think that's a risk that is introduced, but also something that adds another nuance that advisors need to work through in their diligence process.
Absolutely. And again, as you said, it's something that you have to consider and you have to document, right? Why did you make that as the determination? And just for us as attorneys, we always like to think about things, obviously, as a worst case scenario. What happens when everything goes wrong? What story are you going to tell? Right?
Yeah.
And what evidence do you have to back up that story? So if you have a good story to tell, and you have documentation that supports that, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
If you don't, good luck.
Good luck. You better have a good lawyer. And in that case, call Katrina. No, that makes a ton of sense. So, I know we're coming up on time as well. And, so I think that the one thing I've heard over and over is documentation, right? You got to have a diligence process laid out at the beginning. And I think including a section of the IPS to personalized solutions makes a lot of sense to have that documented and then be following that just like you would with any of your other funds, right? You have a watch list. We've put together some RFPs in order to help advisors through that, just kind of templated RFPs. So, if anyone's looking for that, shoot us an email and we can get that to you. So I think just quick recap, right? Documentation, have the process in your IPS, have it documented in a place that you can easily access for when the regulators come. And then make sure that you're following that process on an ongoing basis. Doesn't necessarily matter, or I should say it matters less what you're actually reviewing as long as it's prudent and a good process. It's just following that process. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah, obviously, ideally, the better the information, the better the outcome. But what is absolutely critical, what the Department of Labor and what courts have said unanimously across the board, is you don't have to be right as a fiduciary. You just have to have a prudent process, to follow that prudent process, and to have
It's like a
documentation.
meteorologist.
Exactly.
That's great. And one last question for you. So, given that we're seeing more of this, do you see a place where there could be a lawsuit? Hey, you haven't taken a look at a personalized solution, and so it probably is prudent for fiduciaries to review it and make a determination why they're not including it. Thoughts on
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think that the plaintiff's bar is very creative. So if a really good managed account or personalized solution comes along and the cost is really low, oh, I can absolutely see a case brought where somebody alleges the fiduciary breached their duty by not even considering this
Yep.
option. Absolutely. So that's why it's imperative to know the options that are available.
Right. We saw that with money market versus stable value, right?
Mhm.
That's kind of an ongoing one there.
It is,
So,
yes.
great. Well, I appreciate your time today, and
Yeah.
you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. No, glad to be here. And it was my pleasure. And hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to follow up, how can they get in touch with you?
You can call my cell phone. You want to include a link?
Yeah,
So
I
that-
can
yeah.
include a link, to
Okay.
the website. Perfect.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Josh.